Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Muscle Owl Talks. I'm here today with Robyn, Duchenne UK mother, as we were describing it earlier. Do you want to begin by introducing yourself and maybe talk a little bit about your story?
Sure, thanks. Hi, Peter. I was, like many people, completely had never heard of the word Duchenne before my son Felix was diagnosed in 2014, in December. And it was quite alienating, and I didn't really want to reach out at that stage. I just sort of wanted to hunker down. You know, we were coming up for Christmas. In fact, it was nearly exactly 3 years ago now. But my husband found that they were lobbying for TransLonna at that stage. We didn't know what TransLonna was, but we saw it was a Duchenne UK lobbying thing. Yeah. My daughter was only 6 months old, so I stayed at home with her. It's like an excuse, really, because I'm not to stick my head out. And he went down to Downing Street and, still in quite a haze. And he met quite a few people there who were busy lobbying, obviously, at that stage. Yeah.
And so this was just a matter of weeks after diagnosis?
Yeah, so I think it was February, maybe late January was when that was happening, I think, of 2015. And he did come away and he said, I met a few really interesting people. And he said, I met this woman who gave me her card and she seemed really together and maybe we should meet.
Yeah.
So we met with Emily and her husband Nick a few weeks after that, and they told us about the DASH. At that stage, they were still Duchenne Children's Trust.
Yes.
And they had this event called the Duchenne Dash, and my husband's a keen cyclist, so he signed up immediately. I think we met them in the March, and it started early June or late May, the Dash did, which is their signature fundraiser.
Yeah. So just to say, this is Emily and Nick Crossley of Duchenne Children's Trust and, now of Duchenne UK. So.
Yeah. So I think we did get like quite into the heart of Duchenne when we went along on that first ride to Paris, because you are surrounded by a group of people who know what the cause is, who are really dedicated to the cause. You know, each rider understands the cause. And then sort of being in the Eiffel Tower afterwards, and I think John Snow was there and Krishna and Guru Murthy were there that year, and it was all quite sort of, oh my goodness, so, this is not an invisible disease like we thought it was. There is a huge momentum happening here. So we became involved off the back of that, just thinking, okay, there might be a space for us to help, because I guess we would have perhaps started a charity. Well, I say we. I'm not that kind of person. I'm a massive supporter, and I think what was really inspiring for me was just seeing, from my complete sort of state of shock, to find these people who had come from the same place I had come from, to have stood where I was stood, and they just didn't take no for an answer. They just. Because even in 2014, when we got the diagnosis, they said there's nothing you can do. And I remember asking the consultant, should I be supporting a certain charity, is there work going on? And he just sort of said, no, not really. And I wish that they had directed us towards, these people who were literally, from my perspective now, gathering sort of an army. People who have come before and people who are coming into it now, who have this attitude of not taking no for an answer.
Yeah. And you end up now in many respects knowing a lot of things that the doctors and some of the consultants you spoke to back then don't know, don't you?
Absolutely, because I think what you realize is that there's the people that create the need for the science, and then there's the science. And in one way, the science is actually, I don't know, perhaps not on par with the people creating the need for the science, because they see the many possibilities. And while we need that, obviously we need the science. Science is golden. But I think the heart and the mind of somebody who's fighting for a cure, and the heart and the mind of somebody who's trying to create something that works, they're different spaces. And sometimes you have to take one hat off and put another one on,
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard to do that upon diagnosis as well, isn't it? It's hard to see things from all aspects. I guess that probably gave you a lot of emotional resolve, seeing all that determination from an early stage.
Definitely. And I think, as I said in my email, when we were diagnosed in what has been referred to as a grey period. And I think Emily and certainly Alex and Kerry Rosenfeld, who I have a lot of respect for, were diagnosed in more of a black period where there were no options. And it's because they had this attitude that they had gotten from people, who around them who had also not given up, that they were able to continue the momentum.
Yeah.
Really effective means, I'll talk a little bit about what I've learned through Duchenne UK.
Yeah, absolutely. So you jumped in then, and what's your journey been like since then? Your son Felix, what was he amenable for TransLonna, or
no, he wasn't? But he was amenable to. So we're like considered lucky because he's amenable to 51 and 53 skips.
Oh wow!
You say it's lucky, but he's not on any trial.
I see. So that's Ep82 now exon dys 51 for anyone
who can pay for it. Nobody can pay for it. That's too expensive in the UK unless you want a trial, which we weren't because he was too young.
Yeah.
But when I met Emily, that they were lobbying for TransLonna. So if we look at the landscape in the last 3 years, I accompanied Emily and Alex to Washington, where I heard them speak on behalf of the entire UK community about how important it was to pass a safe and effective drug.
Absolutely.
Which, I really think it has drawn the attention onto Duchenne. It has attracted a lot of investment. It has paved the way for more momentum. And I think it was really important when I was in that room, and it was phenomenal to see the community gathered. I don't think there has been a bigger community gathering of Duchenne patients and family ever. And it was, it felt strong. People felt it, definitely there was a certainty, and it was quite a privilege to be in the room, really. So I was very pleased when they decided on that decision. So that happened. The monomer has gone through all sorts of new phases of trials, and I know that the woman in the UK who's running the trials, Michaela Guglieri, her post has been funded by Duchenne UK. Because her post had ended and she was going to go back, and this is what I think is so amazing about this attitude that I'm talking about, that is certainly rife in Duchenne UK. And that is, when you see a problem, you tackle it head on. In fact, I think they can predict problems often, and it's this kind of smoothing the course so that this generation, hopefully, of children, men, women, boys and girls with Duchenne can have access to these treatments.
That kind of tenacity and awareness that you're talking about there, I guess you've seen already. How would you explain that, the importance of it in terms of fighting for a treatment for Duchenne muscular dystrophy? Why is that so important?
It's because Duchenne is a race against time. It's always been a race against time, but I feel like the race against time is it feels like there's more awareness of the time ticking by now, because there's so much hope on the horizon. It's very difficult to live with that amount of hope and the short amount of time. So without tenacity and without that very single-minded vision, time seems to go even faster than it already is. And we just can't afford to do that. So you really need to be paving the way before the problems come. And I've just come back from Barcelona at the World Orphan Drug Congress, where Duchenne UK were launching Project Hercules. You heard about Project Hercules?
Absolutely, the new project. So I don't know, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's it's just really in keeping with the vision, and Emily said, from a really basic patient perspective, the development of drugs is a really difficult journey, and there are effectively two mountains that drug companies have to climb. And the first one is getting it approved by the EMA and the FDA, and then you've spent millions, sometimes billions, on this approval process, and then now we need to convince the payers like NICE that these drugs are actually value for money. But you need a whole different evidence set for that. And so the drug that's been approved is sat on the shelf while companies spend money they don't necessarily have. It's a very complicated process. They have to gather the evidence from nowhere. It's time consuming, it's expensive, and it's full of holes. So Hercules has really done an amazing job of lightening the burden for drug companies by getting them to collaborate and share the burden of the cost and share information so that they can create a sort of core set
Yeah.
of endpoints and values that can be sort of amended for each company's particular needs. And yes, just sort of create a pathway up that mountain so they can get there really quickly, and everybody wins.
Yeah, I guess it's quite an unexpected pathway as well, isn't it? When your child's first diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and well, in this day and age, you're told, well, there are no treatments, and then you suddenly find out, well, there are potential treatments, in the pipeline. And then I guess it's one of the unexpected things. You don't expect that maybe there are these treatments that can work, but there's going to be all these different sort of wide-ranging obstacles as well. Not just the treatment work, but can the treatment be proven to, the right standards? Can all these different things? How was that? Was that a surprise, as big a surprise for you as it would be for, I guess, me?
I mean, certainly your experience of Duchenne is different with you've come, you're like...
That's one of the things I find with these experiences, because you talk about the different periods in which people are diagnosed. I think it's fascinating for me to compare, because I've heard parents say that they think it's harder for diagnosis now, because when my brother was diagnosed in 1996, there was nothing, and there was hope of maybe a magic drug, a cure, a treatment tomorrow that could potentially come out of nowhere. No one knew, because there wasn't the internet back then, and that hope maybe kept people going. But now that you've got sort of treatments on the line that might be there, but people might not be able to get them, there's a kind of trauma in a way that that wasn't there in the 1990s or any time before that. So it's certainly a very different experience, isn't it?
Well, it is. And I think, I do just want to Duchenne UK again and just say that, with the creation of the hub, so you're absolutely right. It is very traumatic to know that there are potential trials that your child could be on, but then to find out that trials are being turned away because we don't have the capacity to host them. Well, that's like having a second diagnosis, third diagnosis, every single time.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I've seen it in the last year with TransLonna getting approved in the UK, and then all of a sudden with Scotland going to the Scottish consortium, turning it down, then Scotland having to fight for it, and then, well, there was the instance with young Finlay in the Isle of Man, whose jurisdiction lay out of the UK, and he was one boy in the whole of the Isle of Man trying to get this drug, when if they'd have, lived in England or anywhere else, they would have got it. And now the situation in Ireland with 22 other European countries, it's this additional fight, isn't it? And particularly when you don't know if the drugs really do work, but the idea is in your mind that this could be the thing that makes or breaks everything.
And this is why the hub is such an important thing, because at least, at the very least, we can bring these trials into the UK. Children or patients can have access to them wherever they're living. And Duchenne UK aren't only, they're funding the staff, they're funding the trial sites, and also with the tamoxifen study. So it is like, yes, there is, and as you say, there was this kind of, oh, but can you have it, but you can't have it. But then with this attitude, with this tenacity, it's like, I am going to get it. I'm going to get it. I'm going to find the money.
Yeah.
We're going to be effectively collaborative. Duchenne UK is not just joining Jack and Duchenne Children's Trust anymore. It's now Alex's Wish and Duchenne Now. And, they're really open to more collaboration. And it does feel like the time has come to really combine the forces, join the mission, get the trials going, get the actors going, smooth the path, because the clock is ticking.
Yeah, because it's a vision like you'd expect, isn't it? And it's just the circumstance isn't like you'd expect. You get a diagnosis. I mean, if it's a diagnosis for cancer or something else, there will be a range of treatment options that you can try. Well, would you like to go this way, or would you like to go this way? And with Duchenne, it's like potential. We're a few years away from this variety of potential options, but we're in this stage at the moment where they're just out of reach, and it's that.
And I think they're just out of reach because nobody has questioned the process up until now. But it just feels like there's a bottleneck of things coming through the pipeline, and you have to be switched on. You have to go. There's going to be a problem here, and I think people are really aware and awake to that because the people involved in Hercules, Fleur Chandler.
Yes, yeah.
So she has been looking at this with both the mum of a Duchenne child's hat on and a health economic hat. To have her and Josie Godfrey, who set up the HTA, the Health and Technology Assessment in NICE, sat at the same table going this is how we can make it better. The first meeting they ever had was in January. We're looking at them launching now in November.
Yeah.
That's fast.
Yeah.
In this landscape.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's really inspiring.
Yeah.
And it's something that you just want to get behind. I think the way that this community and that Duchenne UK have contributed to the landscape, it's really a very good example of what you can achieve through dedication and collaboration.
No, absolutely. I guess looking back in terms of it's been 3 years since the diagnosis, and you've since seen the landscape, shift slightly as well. I guess one thing I always say to people in this position is, what would you say to yourself back then upon diagnosis, in receiving that diagnosis and thinking that there was no help there and no hope in sight, to seeing everything that you've seen now?
If I'm being really honest, I think I was always an incredibly optimistic person.
Yeah.
And I think we've been really fortunate to have been able to hitch our wagon to this charity because everything that we wanted to hear, they were saying.
Yeah.
And I remember them saying that about this company, Solid Biosciences.
Yeah.
I remember when they heard about because they're one of the founding members. And they found out that the preclinical data had brought in massive investment. And then we went to Boston to go and talk to Solid, and they told us what their milestones were for last year. And we went back this year to find out if they'd hit them. And it's just incredible to hear them say, yes, yes, we have. We're on track. So some people really do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah. And I guess given the landscape at the moment, it's really important, more important than ever before that, people are hitting their targets, isn't it? Absolutely.
And, and then just also, Wave Life Sciences. You heard about them? So
yeah.
They're doing, they weren't even on the radar 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think what I would say to myself back then, and I think some people did say it to me and I just didn't believe them, is that science is moving so fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just don't believe it until you see it.
Yeah.
But it feels like I'm living in a sci-fi film.
And this is the thing, I guess the key thing about this day and age and the difference from the past is that you can see it, whereas in the past it was something you were given hope, but the hope wasn't something tangible that you could really see or that you could see panning out in terms of this time next year, in terms of a timeline down the line, whereas now we can actually look ahead and we can say, okay, we can imagine this thing's going to take this amount of time and this can be in the market potentially at this point down the line.
Yeah, I think we've been really lucky to just go. We found really cheap flights on Norwegian Air if you ever want to go to Boston from Gatwick. No, but actually kind of going I want to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah. Yeah.
We met with Eric Hoffman, who's obviously fronting the Vamolaran stuff, and we went and we met with Wendy from Wave and with Solid, and when you're that close to the science, it's nice that you go, these aren't Chinese whispers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess as well, there's the compassion that goes with it, as you know, being all of a sudden with all these other parents of children who have the same thing, who've been through the same thing, and you're all experiencing it together, so to speak. I guess that's something that I see as like almost an added aspect of these advisory committees that, you know, people are having these days, is it's almost like power in numbers.
Yeah, so, you know, I have thought about it a few times, like would the decision have been made if we hadn't been there en masse like that, you know, filling up a secondary room, having to do it with, you know, there was no space.
Yeah.
You know, I'd like to say yes, we would have, but I also think they filled up every single testimonial slot, and every single person bar one who I think was paid to go and say something. I think it was like 60 people who stood up for 3 minutes at a time to give their testimony. It was so powerful.
Yeah.
If we'd only had their testimonies and not so many bodies in the room, I'd like to think that we would still have won it.
Yeah. But I guess that's the frustrating thing as well, of having to bring people en masse, you know, almost having to push it so far in order to get these things that, you know, people should just be able to get just based on, you know, science alone.
Yeah, and, you know, there was a full film crew there. I think they had 4 camera people documenting every single minute of it, because I think they knew that this was going to be, you know, they didn't want the FDA to wiggle out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a tricky situation, and it is a fascinating situation to see at the moment, with TransLonna being approved in the UK but not approved in the US yet, and exon dys51 being approved in the US, but again, like you say, not over here. I guess part of what I was alluding to before, you know, in terms of your son, Felix, would you be looking to get him onto, you know, is that what you've got in mind, you know, foremost, to get exon dys51 in?
I think what we would get what we would really hope to get for Felix is to get onto a WAVE trial. And, you know, because we've become friends with Wendy Erler, who's the patient advocate there. Yeah. We introduced her to Duchenne UK. She came over to the launch of the hub.
Yeah.
She's amazed at the trial site capacity. She's looking at the Evelina Hospital. So what we hope for, you know, what I would love is for Felix to be screened and qualify for one of their trials.
Yeah.
Which I think they would like to bring to the UK next year at some point, because they've just started their phase 1 study in the US.
Wow.
So we know that it's going ahead. You know, they've got their IND approval.
That's really good.
And they're incredibly transparent company. So for us, we feel really lucky that Felix may benefit from it. And what we're hoping for is to get him on a trial. You know, ideally, like in an ideal world, like he would be on a trial next year.
Yeah. Wow, that's wonderful. And again, one of the other benefits of there being so many potential options at the moment in the community. That's wonderful. And I guess, if people see you around the community, do you know, will you be going to different events? Does Felix's father come to these events as well?
Oh, yeah. So actually, I think I'm sort of the behind the camera person in our little team. What Felix's father, he's an ex-rugby player and a really keen triathlete and sportsman. So I think his sort of coping mechanism and indeed his channel of this attitude that I really feel is rife and contagious. Is that we hitched our wagon onto Duchenne UK and their amazing fundraiser event, which is a 24-hour cycle ride from London to Paris every year.
Yeah.
So what Ali has done is he's taken a core group of people from London to Paris in 24 hours and then on to Monaco through the Alps.
Wow.
Which takes about 7 or 8 days, which is incredibly grueling, but it's like you'd be very glad to be a part of that team. It was an amazing adventure, and we were only going to do it. He was only going to do it once but it got such amazing feedback that he now has to do it again. So I'll be cheering them along and being a bike widow for the next half of the year.
That's brilliant. And when will that be happening?
I think the dash this year is I think it's the end of May. It's sort of the beginning of the summer, and then they go with that group, and then when everyone's having a fun time on the train back to London, they continue the really hard legs.
That's wonderful. Well, we'll definitely be speaking.
So it's called the Duchenne Max.
Duchenne Max.
Duchenne Max.
Tongue twister. Well, we'll definitely hopefully be speaking to you again sooner towards that, and you can tell us a little bit more about how that's going and what's going on. And hopefully, again, we'll be moved further on in the Duchenne, landscape.
Yeah,
and that'll be
amazing to talk to you next year and go like, hey, you know what, Felix is on that trial.
People will look back on these episodes in 10 years' time and say, remember when?
Hopefully. Okay, thanks, Peter.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.